Today I'm speaking with Bethany Leger. Bethany, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Tim.
Yeah, so good to meet you. And
Yeah.
Bethany is actually a fellow YouTuber, so I'm always excited to have another YouTuber on my channel, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Bethany is from Texas, but she currently lives in North Carolina. She is a former Jehovah's Witness, and we'll talk about that extensively. She is also an author. She wrote a book called Physically In, Mentally Out, which is the PMO reference there, Navigating Your Exit from Watchtower. I'll have the link for that beneath this video, so please do check that out. She's currently working on a new book called Burning Down the House. I love that title. Coping with Toxic Family Dynamics, Estrangement, and Rebuilding Your Life. Again, she's also the creator of the YouTube channel. It's called Stop the Shunning. Please go like and subscribe to her channel. She discusses the harmful practices of the Jehovah's Witnesses organization there. She's also a blogger. She has a WordPress site. I'll have the link for that beneath this video, so check that out as well. But that's what I know about you so far, Bethany. If you could please tell us more about yourself and some fun things, and then we'll get into your story.
Sure. I just love how you say blogger. It feels very Y2K. Got my little blog going. It's just so funny.
Yep.
No, I'm a writer. I've always loved to write, so I do like little blog posts on my website, just 500 words or less, because I think everybody's attention span is just that of a gnat, considering all the social media. We're just pelted with images and quick information. Everybody's doom scrolling and everything. So yeah, I try. If I'm not writing a book, I try to keep writing and doing that. Yeah, so got the blog, got the I love to paint.
Nice.
So yeah, I used to paint a lot actually, back when I was a Jehovah's Witness. Honestly, just because it was an escape. Being a Jehovah's Witness was so drab and gray. So I craved color
Yeah.
and imagination and creativity. There was no room for that, for literally drawing outside the lines within the Jehovah's Witnesses. So yeah, I've been trying to get back into painting. I painted prolifically for about 10 years, from like 2009, yeah, to 2019 or so. That was when the last time that I'd been painting. So but yeah, so just a couple things.
Do you have a particular medium that you use, or do you use all kinds of media?
I've never been properly trained. I'll just be honest. I'm not like, no, I never went to school. I never went to art school. Um, I use acrylic. Acrylic is very versatile. I mean, like it dries quickly. You can scrape it off. I have not. Honestly, I'm terrified of oil. I tried to use oil once, and like it took like 6 months to dry. It was like something insane. So
Well,
I just yeah, I'm jealous of people who have a really high skill level and can make things look so realistic and get all the subtleties and nuance of like skin tone and all that stuff. I just never committed to doing that. I think certain things that look so realistic, it's like I might as well just use a camera. Like I take a photo. So I don't know. I just like I love figurative painting. Yeah, and just use acrylic and just lots of fun, kind of like tongue in cheek.
mhm.
Uh, just I hate the word quirky, but more I guess pop art, but not necessarily Andy Warhol. Just that kind of thing. Figurative. Can I say
Yeah.
boobs on your channel?
Yeah.
now now that I have your attention. No, a lot of like women, like figurative
Mhm.
painting, stuff like that, but like just fun. Just women are beautiful to paint, so
That's
that
awesome.
that was something that I always used to paint back when I was even a witness, and got some crap for
Mm. I,
it.
I I've never done like to that level, but I was an art gallery guard once for mostly Baroque level art and Baroque art, and that was really cool just getting exposed to that. And I definitely wish I could do a little bit more in that realm. It's very cool to have that skill set, and I love to see my kids. They're always drawing, and I'm trying to learn some animation so I can bring some of their drawings and paintings to life. So
That's cool, man. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not professionally trained, and I didn't go to art school, so
yeah.
more of like an outlet. I think when you do something mental all the time, when you're deep, and I love to write, but when you're deep in it, I think sometimes I just want to go scrub grout
Yeah.
or, or paint, do something physical, go mow the lawn. I think it's just one of those things of like of being visual instead of having to articulate your thoughts or your feelings into language. So
Yeah, I think the deconstruction process definitely gives us a reason to find some creativity, whether it's artwork or painting or dancing or something, just getting out in nature. Well, I'm so glad
Yeah.
you're here. Again, we're going to talk some more about some other aspects of what you're doing these days with YouTube at the end of the interview. But if you could, I'd love to have you take us back to the earliest days. What was it like growing up in a JW family, and sort of, especially for someone like me that was not a JW? Could you elaborate at least a little bit on some of the core things that you were taught and you believed, and how that journey went?
Yeah, so I was born into a devout Jehovah's Witness household. My parents were devout. They were born into it and raised in it. So it's not like somebody came to my parents' door and converted my parents and that's how we became Jehovah's Witnesses. My parents were both hardcore Jehovah's Witnesses from the time, they were born into it. My father, he was actually a volunteer at the Brooklyn headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses back in the late 60s. So like late 60s, early 70s, it was like he was stationed there like the military. It was a very strict environment. So he was a volunteer there. And now they're based, I think Jared Kushner bought the headquarters for like 340 million or something like that in like 2016, 2017. And I don't know, somebody can look that up and see whatever came of that. I think he ended up pulling out of that. But anyways, but the Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters is now in upstate New York. So that's where they're based now. But my dad was a volunteer there, and then he met my mother in Brooklyn. And I always say this: my father was sort of like this sheltered young man from El Paso, Texas, and then my mother was this spicy Brooklyn chick. It's just the personalities were very different, but they ended up getting together, and then they married, and then moved to Dallas, Texas. Eventually settled in Dallas, Texas, I should say, in the early '80s. And so I was born in the '80s in Dallas, Texas, and yeah, but my family, or I was going to say our family, my parents were pretty balanced as far as Jehovah's Witness parents go, because Jehovah's Witnesses can be very strict. So they tried to present it to me, in my mother specifically, or particularly tried to present it in a very balanced, reasonable way. But
Was
I
it
mean,
like to avoid you being turned off by the legalism, that kind of motivation?
yeah, my mother was a very compassionate person, funny, outgoing, and I think she was trying to, bless her, mold or present the religion in a way that reflected her instead of the other way around. Like my mother was trying to be reasonable and fun loving and Jehovah's wonderful, and present these ideas and beliefs to her child in a way that her child wouldn't feel like she's, so I wouldn't grow up feeling like I'm under the thumb of this like almighty ruler who's so strict. But the reality is the Jehovah's Witnesses are strict, and they're ruled by the governing body based in upstate New York. They're centralized leadership and you can't question them. So and there's more to say about that. So I had a generally happy childhood, but growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, to be a little bit more specific, you you learn that you have the truth with a capital T. So everybody else is wrong. Every other Christian denomination, Buddhism or Jewish or whatever, everybody else is wrong. Jehovah's Witnesses have the truth of the universe, and you are taught to avoid classmates, your coworkers, even your what they call worldly people, even your worldly family, non-Jehovah's Witness family. And in the Jehovah's Witnesses, I've said this before, worldly is a slur. And I know like Mormonism, and there's other groups that use that term, but in the Jehovah's Witnesses, if you're not a Jehovah's Witness, you're worldly, and therefore you're a potentially dangerous influence, or you're just not a good influence. So
Hmm.
I I had fairly balanced parents, but there was a lot of, even from a young age, cognitive dissonance going on. I know that's kind of heavy to jump into right away, but something wasn't adding up. Even from the time I was a kid, I didn't fully buy in or internalize it. It was just, well, this is what we do. We're Jehovah's Witnesses. We go to the Kingdom Hall, because they don't call it church. We go to the Kingdom Hall. I go to the meetings. Again, they don't call it church. We're going to meetings, and we have the Watchtower magazine, and this is our life. But I can't hang out with little Susie from school. She's worldly. I can't I can't bond with my worldly relatives, my uncle so and so, my auntie so and so, because they don't serve Jehovah. We had okay relationships with them. There was a respect. There was always a respect when we go to visit them because a lot of my family lived in New York. Had a lot of non-Jehovah's Witness, a lot of worldly family on my mom's side who were wonderful, lovely people. So that was very confusing as a child. I can't be friends with my classmates at school. I have to keep distance from them because they don't serve Jehovah. I
Mm.
can't even be close to my worldly family, blood relatives, because they don't serve Jehovah. So as far as my background and upbringing, it's like it I didn't grow up on a compound. I think people are may not know about Jehovah's Witnesses. Not like, you know, some special compound or whatever. Like I grew up going to public school. I went to public school K through 12. I even went to college, which was a big no-no. That's a whole other story. I grew up around people in the world, but they always tell you you're no part of the world.
Mm.
So I remember feeling lonely and isolated, but at the same time being told I'm happy and we're Jehovah's happy people and we have the truth. But something from a very young age, sorry, that was long-winded, Tim, but something from a very young age told me, um, they say the truth, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. So why do I feel imprisoned? Why do I feel,
Mm.
why does this feel so restrictive and disconnected from humanity and just, yeah, I knew something was off. I didn't 100% buy in,
Mm.
but it felt like an obligation because you're told you have to save other people. That's why we go knock on doors, and preach to people because they need to be saved and they need to know Jehovah. So we're gonna save humanity. So it felt like an obligation, but it was not a joy. That's a key distinction.
It's so
That
interesting to hear your
yeah.
description of it because in some ways, I think those of us who grew up in typical Protestant evangelical fundamentalism, we would have, if we heard something like that, and we definitely did hear occasionally things about JW. Some author would come to church and on a Sunday evening would tell us about how to witness to a JW if you ever come across one. So we'd like hear these little snippets, but they were always painted as like very different and very much not having the truth. But it's striking me that there's some similarities there that are really amazing. Number one, the message that we're the only true church. Boy, as much as it was framed a little bit differently in my experience, that basically that message still came through. Like we have the one true message, and it certainly wasn't JWs or Catholics or Buddhists. Like you mentioned, it just you have to interpret. You have to have the right book, and you have to interpret it correctly, or else it all falls apart, or it's all just an example of human arrogance coming through, or we're making up religious rules. And of course, the cliche you probably heard us all say was, "It's not a religion; it's a relationship." All the other people are just doing religious stuff. We're having a real relationship with the real God. But also the idea of like the loneliness and the isolation, we weren't in that same boat. But when you get egotistical about it, where you think I am theologically better than all of you effectively are in a similar boat because you're just like everyone else is my mission field. And I'm not there to become their friend or to become their partner. I'm there to witness.
What word did you just use? Mission field?
Yeah, my mission field.
What we used to call it. School is your own personal territory.
Mm.
Work is your own personal territory, wherever you can witness and try to recruit people to become witnesses. Yeah, I just find that interesting.
Yeah, and
Uh,
but you end up in a spot where you feel like you're in a different class, and you want to raise them up to your class of your understanding of the gospel and the Bible, but unless they come up to that, you're pretty much in an echelon by yourself. So it's a sort of a passive aggressive loneliness, but it ends up being very similar. It's interesting. When you can ask when you were in that though, w- would you have looked back at it and said that there were ever moments where you felt like you were just like, I'm doing the right thing. I'm on the highway to heaven, and this is a good feeling. Like I've got this sense of security and love from God, from Jehovah in my heart, and I'm in a good spot. Like, was there ever any highlights, or was it always like something's off here from the very beginning?
wow, that's a good question. So, so there was okay. So actually, I was speaking to somebody. This was a few weeks ago, and he put it in a way that I had never thought to say it. He said he grew up as a 98% believer. So he was similar to me in that he felt like it was an obligation and felt like it was the right thing to do. Like we've been given the truth, and this is a heavy responsibility to save people and to do the right thing. But he too had that little, like, in his gut, in his intuition, said something was off. So to be just quick answer, no, I never had those warm fuzzies. And this is not to diminish other people's experience or people who grew up in different Christian denominations, because I've heard people give their testimony or their stories, and they've said things like, oh, I really believed and I felt like Christ was with me, or I felt like the angels were with me, or I felt like God, I really had a close relationship with God. Everything was mediated by the governing body and by the Watchtower organization. So Jehovah just felt it just all felt distant, disconnected. It felt legalistic. It felt rigid. If your experience was not filtered through the lens of what was the Watchtower pipeline, you can't have if that makes sense, you can't have a separate, for lack of a better word, religious experience that says, now I know Jehovah. Now I do have a personal relationship with God, and I feel, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like if the two felt completely detached. It's like, if you're being a good Jehovah's Witness and following all the rules, then you should feel close to God. But there's people who do that and they still don't feel it's I'm probably not making any sense. It's the Watchtower organization that they conflate themselves with God.
Mm.
So you're not no, to answer your question, I never felt an actual relationship with God or a religious experience. It just felt like something that was a religious ideology that was imposed on me by my parents, that where we put on suits and ties, or, skirts or whatever. And it was very legalistic and ritualistic, and we knock on doors and we follow the rules.
Mm.
It was never, I don't remember feeling anything authentic. That's the word I was looking for. I never experienced a genuine or authentic religious experience, because it's a man-made, it's organized religion. They like to, they like you used the word echelon earlier. They like to put themselves as the upper crust. Everyone else is below us or beneath us. But really, you're organized religion, setting rules and threatening people. And yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, that was helpful. Can I ask, when you became exposed, I'm sure eventually, to evangelical Protestant theology, did you ever get the sense that part of the contrast might as well be the theology, where you're not really ever safe, you can always fall away? Whereas, like, for me growing up, it was like you could technically fall away in the sense that your profession of faith originally could have been pretend. You could have said, "Oh, I believe completely in the blood of Jesus, saving my sins," but you weren't really truly doing it. You were just saying it because everyone else is doing it. And in that sense, you could fall away. But if you had done it once and it was true and genuine and you meant it through and through, I am a horrible sinner. Christ is a wonderful Savior. My sins were paid for on the cross. I am truly sealed. Like you almost not like you'd want to ever offend God, but almost like you could give God the finger and he'd still save you, because were your transaction of being declared righteous was done. It was like a judge just said, I've said you are guilty, but I'm going to declare you righteous anyway. The hammer goes down. It's officially legally done. You are redeemed. And so at that moment, you're like, I want to do right things, but it's just to say thank you to God, not to earn points or to stay secure. Did you feel like that contrast ever became part of it?
That's interesting you bring all that up. That's a key difference. Jehovah's Witnesses, you're never actually saved. You're always working for your salvation. And yes, one little screw up. You smoke a cigarette and you get excommunicated, you're done.
Mm.
Okay? To segue a little bit, and to your point, circling back around, Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm sure you're going to have something to say on this as far as like baptism and things like that, and how you are saved, what your experience was like with this. But in the Jehovah's Witnesses, you are expected, it's not written in stone, but if you're not baptized, like full immersion dunking, if you're not baptized by the time you're like 15, 16, there's a lot of social repercussions, there's social pressure. So they're a publishing company. You're literally called an unbaptized. So I'll give you my experience, when I was 11 or 12, I became an unbaptized publisher. And at the time, you don't question this. Like, it's just all you know as a Jehovah's Witness. So I became an unbaptized publisher, which means you go through a list of questions and be like, okay, well, what did Jehovah's Witnesses believe? They make it look like, what does the Bible teach about blah, blah, blah. But really, you're learning Watchtower rules and doctrine. So how does the organization feel about this? What does the Bible teach about angels? What does the Bible teach about blood? What does the Bible teach about fornication? Or what? And you're like 11 years old. You go through these questions, and then you get like this badge. Not really, but like you're allowed to hit this status level of unbaptized publisher. And that usually happens when you're a preteen. And some people, they did it when they were like 8 or 9. I think I was like 11 or 12. And that means that now you can go door to door preaching, knocking on doors, with an adult, and you can count time. So anytime anybody watching this, if a Jehovah's Witness ever came to your door and it happened to be a young person, and it doesn't have to just be a preteen, it could be an adult who's trying to convert and going through this process. But if you ever had somebody come to your door, they're counting time. So at 11 or 12 years old, now I could officially get a little white slip that said Bethany, with my maiden name and everything. And then I spent 8 hours this month knocking on doors. I placed 17 Watchtower magazines. This might be blowing somebody's mind who's like, what? That's what they were doing? And maybe people who are watching are like, oh yeah, I know their tricks. But you can now document your preaching activity as an unbaptized publisher. Because again, it's a publishing company, but you don't think about that as a kid. So you do that, and then the next step up is you're expected to get baptized. It was never a religious experience. I never really, you're supposed to go to God in prayer and connect with him and pray to him and say, I want to dedicate my life to you. And you see this in their literature, like they have photos and drawings and depictions of young people praying. Are you going to make your dedication? So I'm praying to God. I'm praying to Jehovah. Jehovah, I want to do your will. And preach the good news and be your servant for the rest of my life. And then you're supposed to do that privately. And then you make your outward dedication by getting baptized at one of their conventions or assemblies in the summer, when they have these big summer conventions at like a local venue, some big football stadium or whatever. So that's what happened when I was 14. And all to say, they say like, oh, well, it's like a marriage, like you can commit to, two people can commit to each other, but when they have a big wedding, they're showing publicly their love. So I didn't even really fully believe it then, Tim. Not even then. There's a lot of social pressure, because all of this to say, you have pressure in the congregation. Well, why isn't, hey, sister and brother so-and-so, why isn't Bethany baptized yet? So it reflects poorly on my parents if I'm 18 and still not baptized. My friends are getting baptized, so you have that peer pressure. It's all consuming. Jehovah's Witnesses is not just going to church on Sunday, and that's not a slam to people who go to church on Sunday. It's all consuming. It is your entire life and identity centers around this. So my whole thing, all of this to say, Tim, children, minors cannot consent to a religious or political ideology. They're not old enough to drink, drive, vote, or get married in most cases. But yet you are going to pressure your parishioners and their children, their minor children, to commit to the Watchtower Corporation for the rest of their life. And once that happens, Tim, once you get baptized, they own you. And love is entirely conditional. Frankly, the whole love is conditional thing is happening. It's all leading up to it, to the baptism and being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Whether you're baptized or not, that's a separate argument. There's always conditional love. It always exists. But what they say is when you get baptized, circling back around 10 minutes earlier to your prior question, when you get baptized, they say, "Oh, congratulations, Bethany. But this is just the beginning." Meaning, no, you're not just saved because you got baptized and you went to in prayer, you did the thing, you stood up in front of thousands of people, you did the dunk. It's not enough. You have to keep going until the end comes, until Armageddon comes. And if you screw up the day before Armageddon comes, you're gone. It doesn't matter if you spent 50 years as a faithful Jehovah's Witness. You screw up once and the leadership deems you, unacceptable in the eyes of God or whatever. So what makes baptism, basically, Tim, so significant is that once you're baptized, if you screw up, and this is a whole another section of the Jehovah's Witnesses that we could talk about with judicial committees and disfellowshipping, the act of excommunication within the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is why I have my channel Stop the Shunning, Stop Mandated Shunning. Jehovah's Witnesses practice mandated shunning. So once a minor commits to this contract, they do not have the developmental capacity to understand what they are committing themselves to. If they make this, quote, decision when they're 14 years old, and in some cases 9 or 10 years old, if they decide with their adult brain when they're 25 or 35 or 45 that they don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore for whatever reason, whether they go out guns blazing and talking about it and they have serious issues with it, or they just want to go away quietly and be peaceful and live their life and move on, it doesn't matter. Their devout Jehovah's Witness family, if they still have devout Jehovah's Witness family, that devout Jehovah's Witness family will cut them off and shun them. So it's not a baptism, it's a traptism. It's how a lot of us ex-JWs refer to it. So, and there's loopholes where some people will not get baptized and think like, oh, well, because I didn't get baptized, there's no reason for anybody to shun me. But shunning is so deeply ingrained in the culture of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the social culture, that there's people who will become kind of flaky and they'll end up getting shunned anyway because they're not falling in line and towing the line. But yeah, baptism, the relationship between baptism and shunning, there is a direct correlation. So because I was baptized when I was 14 into something that I know nothing else, I'm told I'm going to die at Armageddon. God's not going to love me. My parents are going to give me shit. It's the thing to do. I think it's the truth. It's an obligation. I have to save humanity. You put all this together. Okay, I guess I'm getting baptized. I get baptized, and then I leave at 30 years old, and I lose my parents overnight. And no, for people who are still active, faithful Jehovah's Witnesses, it's never enough. You're always going to be working for your salvation to the day you die.
So just going back to the timeline, you were baptized, and then at that point you're doing more and more work. At what point did you actually sort of have the first thought in your head of this is not the right worldview, that this belief system is not right? When did you have the ability to first articulate that enough to say, Houston, we have a problem?
Well, there's two answers to that. One, I was never happy, and the people around me were not happy, including family members. So you're telling me that I'm happy. I'm being told that I'm happy. Aren't we so happy? We're Jehovah's happy people. But I see people who are depressed, wanting to off themselves on 5 medications just to get through the meetings and going to the Kingdom Hall. So seeing the actual fruits, you probably know this scripture, what I'm talking about. I can't recall it at the moment, but it's by the fruits of your tree, you'll know what sort of tree it is.
Yeah, I think it's Matthew 7 or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Jehovah's Witnesses like to use that, like, look, we're starting Bible studies all over the world. We preach throughout the world. We have the truth. We have such happy people. Look at the evidence that we have. Look at our tree. And I would argue the opposite. You have serious issues that I have not gotten into yet that actually led me to officially wake up. But in other words, there's a lot of miserable, unhappy people in this organization, and it's just constant. Basically, Tim, it's just constant gaslighting. So the first thought I had was, I may be a child, but I'm not stupid. I may not have the language to articulate this, but kids are observant. And I'm seeing the adults in my life. They're unhealthy. They're not happy. I'm seeing older people in the congregation who spent their whole lives in this organization, and just, I don't know, just without getting too much into it, they have nothing to show for it. They look miserable. They have health problems, and it's not just, and I'm not shaming them for sticking with it and having health problems, but you can tell it's an internal thing.
Yeah.
That being a Jehovah's Witness has made them ill. And that eventually happened to me. I became ill and was developing really unhealthy coping mechanisms to suppress the cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing the older I became. So that was the first thing, was the intuition. My doubts weren't getting quieter. And the more I shoved it down, I was like, I feel like I'm being manipulated. I had this distinct feeling, Tim, to sort of answer your question, the first part, I had a distinct feeling that I was being manipulated and being brainwashed. Because I'd like to, I could tell you the second thing, the second part to this, but what people need to understand, and what I'd like to interject here, if that's okay, is Jehovah's Witnesses go through systematic brainwashing. So their literature from their publishing company, their literature, their Watchtower and Awake, and their other materials that they study, it's not a matter of opening the Bible and having a critical discussion, or, this made me feel a certain way, or this made me feel, oh, I hadn't thought of it this way, or I hadn't thought of it this way. Oh, what an interesting way of looking at this passage. And none of us are perfect. None of us have the answers, but the Watchtower organization always had the answer. And they present those answers to you in their literature. What am I trying to say? When Jehovah's Witnesses go to the Kingdom Hall, when they go to their meetings, because again, they don't call it church, but it's their version of church services. I grew up from infancy. From the time I was born until 30 years old, I went 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays, and then preached on Saturdays, knocking on doors. So Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, Tim, I went to, well, besides the weekend, I went to public school. I'm exhausted. I have homework. I'm stressed out. I'm going through puberty. You got all that, those hormones, and then you got shame and guilt coming from my indoctrination about the opposite sex and just puberty and just life. And I can't be friends with my classmates. So I have this otherness that I'm living with, this otherness and this weirdness and being isolated. Okay. And then I go to these meetings Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and all it is brainwashing sessions. It's literally a very structured session from 7:30 to 9:15, where you read their magazines and their books, and they have questions that are rhetorical questions. Why do we not associate with people from school? Okay, and the elder, who's like a deacon or a pastor, okay, and maybe in other denominations, the elder stands at the front of from the podium, says, okay, paragraph 1, why do we not associate with our classmates or our coworkers? And then people raise their hands. Okay, yes, you, Bethany. And then here I am, a kid. They hand you a microphone. We don't associate with people from school or work because they don't serve Jehovah. And hand the microphone back. Yes, good job. Okay, paragraph 2. Why do we, it's rhetorical questions that you're not using. They do not teach you critical thinking skills. You're required to parrot back Watchtower rhetoric. So this is not just a matter of, I grew up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses and it sounds kind of vague. It's like, I went to brainwashing sessions where this this information was drilled into my brain. They don't care what you actually think or feel. I'm trying to make that clear. I hope that's coming across.
Yeah.
They don't care about you as an individual. It's very strong group think. You have to stay on message and make sure that your answers, make sure you internalize the answers that we have given you.
I could just add, I think we have something similar in certain groups. Some Christian groups would say that's very, very, very foreign to us. But if you're in the more Calvinistic groups, you know what Calvinism is referring to?
I know it, but not really.
It's basically just saying that you if you made a profession of faith in Christ, it's not because you decided this was a good idea. I need to get out of hell and get to heaven. And Jesus sounds like a wonderful guy. You did do that, but you did it because before time began, God looked at all the people that were about to go to hell, and he said, I'm going to pick that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And you are now the elect. You are God's, Jesus's bride, as it were. And so basically you didn't start it, and you're not going to be able to fall away because he's the one that started it in the first place. And you're therefore sealed, and it gives all the glory to God. God did it all. Even the faith to believe is a gift. Well, Calvinists tend to go into catechism and into creeds a lot. And if you get into the hyper Calvinistic groups, catechism is like, I mean, you were talking about, huge books that as kids, you just repeat it over and over and over. The Westminster Catechism, it's major. I mean, hundreds of lines of, who is God and what is sin. And you keep parroting it over and over. And in some of these religious groups that are very intense about sheltering from other parts of the world and even other non-Calvinistic Christians, it's very, very similar. So it's interesting. JW are so different in some ways, but I'm really connecting on a lot of levels here. So many parallels.
It's wild.
Your thought about how you saw other people not really having joy, that is fascinating. That is one of the biggest parts of my deconstruction that occurred, is like the early seeds. If someone said, when did you start to deconstruct? I didn't really deconstruct till like maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And it took about 3 years before I escaped and became an atheist. But if you said, well, wasn't there something at all? Like, didn't you have any inklings of something before? What you said is exactly one of the earliest things. My family of origin, we grew up all the time having Christian radio, preachers on in the background. It's like, some families have like background music. We literally had preachers preaching in the background all the time. And of course hymns and so forth. But that, you think, between, my dad being a Christian school teacher, oftentimes preaching as a backup pastor at the church, we're doing family devotions, we're hearing the songs, you get in the car, bam, Christian radio, just everywhere. It's on blast. And he was one of the most obnoxious and toxic people I've ever met. When I went to Bible college, I moved in with my grandma because she was a lot closer to the Bible college. Same thing. She had Bible, church stuff on all the time, Christian music on all the time. She was one of the crankiest, most selfish women I'd ever met. And I remember where it really hit when I was finishing up my degree. Went to be a pastor, and part of it at the end is you have to do an internship underneath your home church. And one of the things that they ask you to do is, of course, spend a lot of time with your pastor, but also find some of the elders in the church that you can really ask, could you mentor me, please? And one of the things that they said was like, you need to look at the elders in your church and say, which of them do you look at and think just in your heart of hearts, gosh, I want to be like them. I want to become a man of God, and I want to look like them someday. And I remember looking in my church, it was a pretty big church, maybe 300-400 people, lots of elders, thinking, you all are some of the cantankerous, boring men I've ever met. Honestly, like I don't see your kids exemplify. I'm like, I go to youth group with your kids. I know what they're like. They're not exemplifying the things of the Lord. I see you as some kind of old, fidgety old fart in church. Like, I'm sorry, but none of you all impressed me that much. And I remember thinking, this is insane. Why in a church this big am I not impressed with all these men? And that became like this whole, like, where's the joy of the Lord? It's real interesting. I personally felt it, but I didn't see it. And that became an early seed for me.
Wow. Yeah, that's so similar. That's so similar to the witnesses. And that's not to say, it's very easy. Yeah. That's funny that you bring that up. It's easy to say, like, look at me here and go like, oh, she's just bitter or nothing good ever happened. My beef, Tim, has never been with individual Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, I know a lot of unhappy Jehovah's Witnesses, but there are some that it works for them and it's their faith. And I'm not trying to take that away. I really don't have a beef with individual Jehovah's Witnesses. I have an issue with the leadership that is abusing and exploiting them and lying to them and rebranding BS throughout the years and calling it new light. That's a whole thing. Maybe that's a weird reference to toss in, but they'll change their doctrine. Jehovah's Witnesses leadership will change their doctrine every couple of years or decades and then call it new light and gaslight their own parishioners. So backing up a little bit, I saw a lack of joy and I'm being told I'm happy. And that was starting to grate on my nerves. And a resentment was starting to brew because I'm thinking, I'm not happy. And I don't know how long I can pretend for my parents' sake. And that's scary, Tim. That was a scary thought. Because as much as I didn't want to admit it, I didn't want to say this out loud, but my parents' love for me was conditional. That doesn't really sink in until until some shit starts to hit the fan, for lack of a better word. When things really start to go down and you really express yourself and you start to express your doubts and you start to say what's really on your mind and you're not lining up like the monkey who's clapping and like, yes, yes, and I'll say whatever and do whatever Watchtower tells me to do. When you actually start to be authentic and stop BSing, that's when there's like this Jekyll Hyde moment where it's like, oh, no, you fall in line or you're going to be shunned. I know that probably sounds dramatic, but it is. So love is entirely conditional. So as long as I'm a perfect reflection of my parents, who are good people, but they are indoctrinated, as long as I'm a perfect reflection of them, everything's good in the world. But whenever I ended up leaving and speaking out and just being like, hey, this organization is not what it says it is. It's harming people. And I'll mention a few things that officially woke me up. When that happened, I was discarded. So it's a very narcissistic organization. It's very much like an abusive relationship. You know, you're nothing without us. My mother, bless her, she always used to say, even back when I was a witness, and I was probably like 21 at the time, my mother would say, I am who I am because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, I owe everything to Jehovah and specifically being a Jehovah's Witness. I am who I am because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And Tim, I swear to you, even when I was still indoctrinated, basically, back when I was like 20 or 21, I literally said to my mother, no, Mom, you're just a good person. So that was another early thing of like, why are we handing everything over as if we're so broken? We're so broken. We're so stupid that we need this organization. I could even understand if you feel you need God or you need Jehovah and you need his direction. I can at least respect that. But to hand over to subjugate your conscience and hand over all your common sense and your good qualities and all the credit to the organization, that bothered me. So the lack of joy, the blind obedience, but then also finally to just answer your question, around 30 years old. So I got married, and we moved to, my husband also left. He was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but we ended up leaving together. To kind of just fast forward, we ended up leaving together, but we didn't leave. And we were living in North Carolina, so we ended up moving to North Carolina, just sort of catch up. So I was from Dallas, Texas. We met in Dallas, Texas. We moved to North Carolina, and a series of events opened our eyes, and we started to do our own research. And he was not happy. I was not happy with the organization. There were things that were making us twitch. Our intuition was talking to us, but you're taught your whole life to suppress your doubts. But like I said, the organization, it made me physically ill. I have mentioned this before in a different interview. I have developed an eating disorder. I had some other really unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I was trying not to see the correlation between the two. I just thought I was a bad witness, or I wasn't being faithful enough, or there was something wrong with me. And so I remember we went to, this was April of 2017. We were at the time living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we go to the Kingdom Hall. My husband, John, and I, we went to the Kingdom Hall on a Sunday meeting, and they had a guest speaker called the Circuit Overseer. Any former Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching this know what I'm talking about. The Circuit Overseer, he's like the head honcho that comes in quarterly to all the congregations to make sure that, everybody's running a tight ship. So he's
Of
standing.
course.
Sounds familiar?
Got to keep the reins tight.
Exactly. So what happened was, it was a Sunday meeting, and mind you, all my 20s, okay, now I'm 30, approaching 31. I don't know, the timeline's a little fuzzy, but I'm definitely in my early 30s at this point. And all through my 20s and my teens, I've shoved my doubts down. I want to make that clear, but I still think it's, quote, the truth. I'm still indoctrinated, that 98% believer, but I'm reaching boiling point. I feel like I'm in a pressure cooker. So we go to this Sunday meeting. The circuit overseer is giving his sermon, or his talk, as they called it. And he stands at the podium. He looks out into the audience and he says, friends, Jehovah's Witnesses are treated like children. It's a very infantilizing approach that they take to grown-ass adults. They talk to you like you're a toddler. So he stands at the podium and he says, friends, it's come to our attention that a lot of friends in the organization are suffering from depression. Isn't that sad? And it was just like, inside I'm rolling my eyes, but I'm like sitting there just like white knuckled. I need like something to bite down on, just like, keep it in, Beth, keep it in, Beth, keep it in, Beth. I'm thinking, yeah, no shit, people have depression. You're telling people Jehovah's Witnesses believe in paradise, that the world is going to be destroyed. The earthly world that we know is going to be destroyed, and it's going to be replaced with paradise, Tim. So they don't believe that they go to heaven. I should have probably mentioned this in the very beginning. Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that they're going to heaven except for a very select few number, 144,000. I know a lot of people have heard about that and they roll their eyes at it. They pluck this number from the book of Revelation,
right,
and gave it literal meaning. So they believe only 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses are going to heaven, or are going to rule with Jesus and be part of his cabinet, if you will, while they rule over the earth. And the earth is going to be transformed into a paradise. And what's sick about this is, I don't care if you believe in paradise, but you're pushing this as the leadership. Armageddon is just around the corner. It's just around the corner. And people are tired, Tim. They're tired. They're depressed. They're physically sick. They have health problems or whatever. They miss their dead loved ones, and they're told they're going to see their dead loved ones again in a physical resurrection on earth. You're promising these wonderful things. No more sickness, death, pain, problems that you're facing now in this wicked system. It's all going to be gone, and we're going to live in paradise. That sounds wonderful. But people are waiting. They're waiting, they're waiting, they're waiting. There's paradise is not to be found. So people are getting depressed. You can only, what does the scripture say? Expectation postponed makes the heart sick. And so they'll quote that too. And they'll say, like, we understand that you're waiting for paradise. It's just around the corner. So they do this to their parishioners. People are sick and tired and developing mental health crisis and depression and sadness and anxiety. And I'm not saying that there can't be some sort of chemical predisposition or whatever that's already exists, but it's exacerbated by this doctrine. So I'm sitting there, circling back around, and he says, oh, isn't that sad? There's so many Jehovah's Witnesses suffering from depression. And so he says, let's turn in our Bibles to, I want to say it's Proverbs 18:1. And I could be wrong on that. You might know where I'm going with this. But he says, if you have depression, let's turn to Proverbs 18:1. And in the Kingdom Hall was silent. All you heard was the little wispy fluttering of pages, people turning, just rapt attention, like he's about to reveal, like he's about to turn into Jesus. They always make it look like it's some major information they're about to impart to you. So they turn in the Bible, and it says, the one seeking The one isolating himself is seeking his own selfish advantage. And I about turned, like, I saw red, because basically what he was saying is Jehovah's Witnesses are kind of slipping away, and they're staying home. We're not seeing them showing up to meetings and to the Kingdom Hall. Like, they're depressed and they're staying home because they're not receiving, they're not happy. They're depressed and they're staying home. And he's basically saying, because you're waiting and you're tired and you're dealing with depression, don't be selfish and stay home and take care of your mental health crisis and whatever you're going through. That's a selfish act. The one isolating himself is seeking his own. So basically, he's shaming the audience into submission. And I had also heard that word. It was a particular trigger word for me, Tim. The word selfish was a trigger word for me ever since I was a little kid. And I had talked to my school counselor about that word, and anytime I was crying, I'm like, I feel like I'm selfish, and Jehovah's going to think I'm selfish, because they use that word to their advantage, selfish. So I'd heard that word my whole life. I'm not good enough. I'm selfish, blah, blah, blah. And for him to stand there and just bold-face shame the congregation that if you have depression, it's your own damn fault. You just need to have endurance and not be selfish. He says, you should be right here in the center of Jehovah's organization. I went red. I floated out of my seat, Tim. My ass ran home. I literally don't even remember how I got home. I know there was a car was involved, and I got in a car and drove. But seriously, I went home and I never stepped foot in a Kingdom Hall ever again. So all of this had been building, but I finally snapped. And once I was out of that environment, just to sort of catch up and fast forward a little bit, once I was out of that environment, when I had that physical distance away from my very devout parents in Dallas, Texas, mind you, this wasn't planned. This wasn't strategic. This was just the process of like, okay, I'm away from my devout parents. Now I'm out of the Kingdom Hall. So the brainwashing sessions, I'm literally stepping away from that energy and the shame tactics and the brainwashing and the indoctrination. I'm stepping away from that. Now I can breathe. I didn't think to myself, I'm never going back. It happened that I never went back. Soon afterwards, I was sitting on the couch one evening and I thought of the bite model. And I know that this is not going to be a shock to some people who are listening. Maybe some people don't know what I'm talking about, but Dr. Stephen Hassan came out with a book called Combating Cult Mind Control. And he came up with something called the BITE model, which stands for Behavioral, Information, Thought, and Emotion Control. So it's these quadrants with all these bullet points. And he's saying whatever group that you're a part of, whether it's religious, political, self-help, whatever kind of group that you're a part of, yoga class, whatever, if the group leaders or the group is enforcing these bullet points, these behavioral checks, emotional things, thought crime, information control, controlling the flow of information, you're probably in a cult. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, long story short, hit almost every single bullet point except for maybe one or two bullet points. So, Tim, I was never happy as a Jehovah's Witness. I always knew something was off. My intuition was always speaking to me, but having this objective criteria confirmed my suspicions. And all of a sudden, that was a major turning point where I went, oh, this guy has no skin in the game. This is not an ex-Jehovah's Witness telling me this is a cult. This is just a cult. This guy studies this. This is objective criteria. And the reason that's significant, Tim, is because Jehovah's Witnesses are told to stay off the internet and not listen to apostates. I would like to hear your thoughts at some point on what apostate meant in your denomination, but to Jehovah's Witnesses, an apostate is someone who stops being a Jehovah's Witness and doesn't agree with Watchtower. And it's the worst possible thing you can be. So I'm an evil apostate because I woke up and I stopped going and I revoked my membership. That was the next step. I revoked my membership. But even before that, after I found out about the BITE model, I officially stopped going and thought, oh my God, this is a cult and you're controlling people and gaslighting people and there's all this religious abuse and trauma happening. And then I found out about the CSA cases and that they had a massive chronic systemic child sexual abuse problem for decades. And that was when I was like, I never went back to the hall, and it was all building up, but I thought, you raging hypocrites, we used to rail against the Catholic Church for their mishandling of child sexual abuse. And it turns out you have your own sharp skeletons in your closet, and that you've been harming children and you've been lying to your parishioners. So it's never really, it's like Pringles. Once you pop, you just can't stop. Sorry. But there's so many things that were piling on. It was like, it's a cult. CSA cases. Oh my God, I'm not crazy. This was you mofos. You mofos this whole time that are harming Jehovah's Witnesses, and people's lives are being ruined. And at that point, so I formally revoked my membership, and it's called, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's called disassociation. So I know people hear that as like a psychological term, like I disassociated, but in the terms of writing a letter and saying, I don't want to be known as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, take me off your list, take me off your roster. My husband and I both did that, and we officially left, so we would not be tethered in any way to the organization.
Can I ask, I know that you talked about shunning happens in a lot of those cases pretty quickly. Were there any sort of like short-term attempts by them, like just to pull you in one last time, like to say, we're about to shun you like crazy, and basically, yes, you will never hear from us again, but can we please reason together? Can we try to address your problems? Do they come after you a little bit?
I appreciate you asking that. So once we disassociated, it was a hard cutoff. And I get it, because my parents are devoted and we're going to stay faithful. We're going to remain faithful. I mean, my parents are in their 70s. And my goal was not to say, hey, mom and pop, blah, 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 I'm leaving. You should too. It's just, hey, I can't in good conscience align myself with this organization anymore. I love you. The door is always open on my end, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't do this. It was a hard shun once it became clear that I would not be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. But interesting that you bring that up, because I do, even though that's the end of what happened, I do think it's interesting to mention what happened prior, to answer your question. So a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, when they're doubting, they start to fade. They call it fading in the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses community, where they don't make a hard line disassociation, because they know that's the kiss of death. They know they're going to be shunned. In 99.999% of cases, it's over between you and your family. But if you fade, they try to fade and do like the half in, half out game. Some of them have kids. They don't want them to lose grandma and grandpa. Some people, they just can't imagine this emotional upheaval of losing their parents or their family at this stage of their life, or at all. There's reasons, and I understand why people fade. I get it. But what happened with me, kind of to back up a little bit, is when I was starting to wake up and stopped going to the Kingdom Hall and stopped doing the brainwashing sessions, I was able to decompress. And to answer your question, Jehovah's Witnesses are so trained, they're like bloodhounds. My parents my mother wasn't even next door. It's not like she can drop by and sense what's happening or talk. Like, she's in Texas, I'm in North Carolina, and it's like my mother could sense something. It's crazy. She could sense something was off. And it's not that we stopped talking, but it just, something was different. It's like I was getting more fatigued. I wasn't like, hey, how's it going? Everything's great. No. So I'm not doing 100%, to be honest with you, Mom. Like, she could sense something was off. And prior to disassociating, I started fading, like so many Jehovah's Witnesses who wake up do. So my husband and I started our fade. And to answer your question, my mother would send me, and any Jehovah's Witness who's watching this, or ex-Jehovah's Witness who's watching this knows what I'm talking about. She started sending me encouragement texts. So, hey, we're thinking of you. we know you're struggling, like poor little sheep. That's how the Jehovah's Witnesses view you. It's always you. It's never them. It's never the organization. Something's wrong with you. You're spiritually weak. So it's like, hey, Beth, we love you. We know that you're having a hard time. And I know she was coming from a sincere place. But I had a sibling who basically fell away, for, in your language, I don't know, like fell away or became inactive from the Jehovah's Witnesses for 20 years. And my mother always held out hope. My parents always held out hope. One day they'll come back. One day they'll come back. One day they'll come back. And sure enough, after 20 years, Tim, my sibling went back to the organization. And it hit me in that moment when I was waking up. I thought, oh, no, I'm not going back. And I don't want to give my parents 20 years of false hope. So were there efforts to rope me back into the fold? Absolutely. To bring me back? Absolutely. And I get that she was only doing what she felt she needed to do as a mother who feels like she's doing the right thing. Oh no, my child, I gotta, but she did not know at the time. She did not know at the time where I was at. I was like, oh, no, I'm not. I'm going to have to think of how I'm going to break this to them.
And once you do share with them that you have disassociated from the church, from JWs, do you at that point pretty much, is it just like almost immediate, like we're not talking to you?
It was a mixture of shock. It's a mixture of shock. I mean, I can't speak for them or put words in their mouth. I can only imagine a level of denial. I was the golden child. I did everything right. Never broke a rule. And yeah, I think they were just I don't yeah.
And how many years ago was this?
I don't want to paint my parents as, I think what I'm trying, the reason I'm not stalling, but sort of hesitant to answer you, Tim, is because I'm not here to paint my parents as evil. My parents are not monsters. They're just products of their environment. They were raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses from birth. They know nothing else, and they're just acting by their conscience. But that's the caveat. I don't think they're acting by their conscience. Their conscience has been handed over to the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And the governing body has given a directive that if somebody leaves the organization, you stop talking to them. You stop mixing in company with that person. I'm not trying to change my parents' mind. I'm just saying I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How long ago was this, did that happen?
This was 2017. My husband and I disassociated on New Year's Eve, 2017. It's our freedomversary.
And how many times have you spoken with them since then?
My parents?
Yeah.
Never again.
And that's, is there any, is it true to say, like, if a family member dies or something, they're allowed to contact you just to say, hey, Uncle so-and-so from Colorado, he's passed?
My grandmother, not my biological grandmother, but somebody who's basically my grandmother. She's the only grandmother I ever knew. She died. I heard about it through the grapevine. No, I did not hear from my parents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's extreme. That's why I have my channel, Stop the Shunning. And that's another thing, Tim, is that it's too easy to look at someone like me and go, oh, it's just revenge or retaliation or vindication. This is inhumane. If you're going to treat me like I'm dead, I'm going to talk about it. Like, I don't care if you're a Jehovah's Witness. I love you. I know you're good people, but you are brainwashed into shunning your only daughter. And I'm going to talk about this. People need to understand that Jehovah's Witnesses are not just a quirky, harmless, kind of goofy looking religious group with the nice old lady that comes and knocks on your door on Saturday. I'm not saying she's evil. I'm saying she's working for an evil corporation.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to raise awareness about that.
If you were physically in the same location as family, there were still JWs. If you were to see them, just say you literally lived close enough to be at the same grocery store, did they literally like just turn their back to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can't say that in my case because I'm in North Carolina and my parents are in Texas. It was just communication immediately ceased. It was done. And there were no hateful words exchanged. It was just this is where our loyalty lies. We are going to remain faithful we're going to remain faithful to Jehovah and his earthly organization. Like they dug their heels in and they made their position very clear. And I think they were just shocked that I had enough self-respect to say, well, okay, but I'm not gonna grovel for your love and respect. I'm not gonna beg you to acknowledge my existence. I think because that's what they meaning just Jehovah's Witnesses learn, is that if somebody is excommunicated, a lot of times the excommunicated person, or the disfellowshipped person as it's often known as, the disfellowshipped person feels such shame. It's a sadistic practice. They feel such shame that that's what they end up doing, because it's inhumane to shun your family member. It's bad enough if you know somebody. Tim, if I just knew you on the periphery in the congregation and treated you like you were dead, it would be weird to me. It'd be screwed up. But to shun your own child or parent, so it's sick. And so people end up going back so they can speak to their family. It's a very sick game. We're not meant to be ostracized, not just from other human beings, but especially our family. And I think I've often said this, it's self-preservation. I'm not shunning my parents back, because I think sometimes that's an easy argument. It's a cheap shot. Oh, well, it just sounds like you're kind of shunning them back because I don't reach out to my parents, Tim. And it's not out of revenge or retaliation or vindication or shunning them, because I'm not shunning them out of ideological differences. I don't care that they're Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't care what they are. You're my parents. I love you. But I refuse to facilitate my own abuse. I'm not going to reach out to you so you can tell me how horrible I am, that I'm an evil apostate, or that you should come back to Jehovah, or these are our conditions for us to love you again and acknowledge your existence. That's a game I'm not going to play. I'm not going to negotiate with emotional terrorists. And I think that they were just a little surprised or probably shocked by the fact that I also kept my position. This is just not right, what the organization is doing to people. It's not personal against you. I love you, but I can't. But that's unfortunately, Tim, they can't separate themselves. Your entire identity is that of being a Jehovah's Witness. So my parents can't separate their identity as a Jehovah's Witness with their innate parental instincts and being my parents. So I'm not here to paint them as these evil people, because they're not. It's just that should tell you how deep the indoctrination of the Jehovah's Witnesses is.
Yeah. And one thing, if I could just piggyback off a couple of the thoughts you shared real quick.
Sure.
I think one of the things I say on my channel is that if you think monstrous thoughts long enough, it turns you into a monster. And I think that, at a certain point, when we're kids, when we're teenagers, you're not necessarily responsible for everything. You may have been through some trauma, you may have been through some bad situations, but eventually you become an adult and you become responsible for whether there's a smile on your face or not. You become responsible for your own mental health. You become responsible for your body and everything else, your money. And again, I just like you would not want to paint your parents as anything other than brainwashed. And I would say the same thing for a lot of loved ones in my life. But the reality is that they are still making a choice. And it's just never-endingly heartbreaking to think about this. And I remember your story reminded me, one of the people I interviewed in the first year of doing this channel, I've been doing this for almost 6 years now, but I interviewed a XJW in New Zealand, and he had a son who, like, when this father had left JWs, his son was like almost a young adult, and his son no longer was able to talk to his own father. And so this father now lives by himself, and his son got married and has kids. So like now he can't see his own son, and even his grandkids, they don't even know he exists. And I remember thinking from that very first interview I did with JW that it's so sick that you can't see this. And I understand brainwashing. I mean, heck, I was in it for 43 years. I definitely understand the dynamics. But I feel like there's also a certain point where when you're ignorant of the issues, you don't know. No one brings them to your attention. But when someone brings them to your attention and says, "Hey, there's some major flaws here. Can we talk about it?" At a certain point, you have to say something. Like my story, for example, was I again, I went to Bible college to be a pastor. I wanted to be a Bible translator in a jungle environment, plant a church in the middle of the rainforest. I took steps towards that goal, and some life got in the way for a while. I still hoped and expected God would open those doors, but living life in the U.S., had children, raising them to love the Lord as you do, doing family time, devotions, and we're singing a song about where Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho, and the walls come tumbling down. But I'm thinking to myself, I know in my head what comes next in the story, that is genocide and land theft and slavery and child brides and stoning and misogyny and all kinds of stuff. And for the first time in my life, I was like a splinter went in my mind, and I said, if you are able to sing Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho to your little 3 or 4-year-old kids, you're also eventually going to have to explain to them the bad story that's behind it. Are you willing to pass this on? Excuse me. And it literally hit me, and it wasn't new information. It was just a new emotion of like, oh my gosh, this is cringeworthy. But what eventually that led me to open up other doors relating more specifically to the questions of where did this come from? We know I was always told there's 4 gospels. Suddenly I discovered there's like 60 gospels. Then I discovered there probably were hundreds of gospels originally, and the 4 that we have, we don't know who actually wrote them. We know there's many endings and so forth and changes. A lot of things like that just kept on popping up, and I could go on for hours about some of that stuff, but I just kept on learning, and eventually it looked more and more like mythology, and the information was like you have to do something with the information. And I think what became a really big watershed moment for me was the moment I was able to articulate this, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I remember saying to myself at some point, I want the truth more than I want my current worldview. And at the moment that I say that, I actually think that they're the same. I think the truth and my current worldview are the same. There's maybe some tweaks to make. But I remember saying, if they're not the same, and this is bigger than just some tweaks, I want the truth more than my current worldview. And little did I know where that was going to go. I would have said even in the very last few months, there's no way I'd be an atheist at the end of this. But remember the verses in the New Testament where Jesus talks about counting the cost? He says if you're gonna go build a house, you're not gonna, you know, have enough money to build half of it and then stop and realize you can't build the other half and put a roof on. Or you're not gonna, as a king, you're not gonna declare war unless you've counted the cost and said, they have 10,000 soldiers. Do I have enough to actually beat them? And if you can't beat them, then you're going to try to sue for peace. Count the cost before you take this on. And it's almost like you realize through these sort of intermediate deconstruction stages that you're starting to count the cost and say, this is going to cost me a hell of a lot of stuff in my life. And you're paying the price. And it's, I guess I say that in a sense to say, I'm surprised that your parents and the loved ones in our lives wouldn't say, you knew what was at stake. For you, it was Armageddon. For you, it was shunning. For me, it was hell. For me, it's deception of the devil. But you knew what was at stake, and you still chose to do it. You still counted the cost and said, it is worth more to walk away from this than to stay in it. And the fact that they can't see, the blinders are so thick that they can't see to say, I at least want to know why you did this, because you knew, in a sense, you knew better, maybe from their patronizing sense. You knew better than to go down this road. You knew what you were asking for. You're asking for the devil to come into your life. You're asking for blatant error. You're asking for secularism to come in. You're asking to walk away from God. You know where this leads. This is darkness. It's like Peter said, or whoever. To who else will we go? You alone have the words of life, Lord. You're walking away from life into death. Why would someone who knows so much? I mean, we can't preach it to you because you've preached it to us. You've taught the sermons, and I did. I did a lot of preaching. You've done this for years. Anything we say to you, you can say back to us 100 times stronger, and yet you still did it. Why? And it shocks me to no end that pretty much almost all of them don't care to know, and that's the testament sort of to what you're talking about, the brainwashing. Like they just put their fingers in their ears and they're like, you know what? There is nothing you could say to me. Nothing. Because I know that 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 I'm right. And that's just one of the scariest things ever is when you can't entertain any other possibilities.
Right. And also, I just think of like the sunk cost fallacy. They've spent their whole life in this. And so I mean, if anything, I really do, in a sense, have compassion that like you've spent your whole life in this is your entire identity. That's scary. I mean, I woke up at 30. My parents are in their 70s. You know, if they wake up now and start questioning now, you know, they have their own deconstruction process to go through, and their own, you know, possible regrets and anger and things that they have to work through. So I'm not, it's not, I never treated it just like, oh, just easy peasy, just leave. I mean, like, I understood it was a big ask, but it was like, you know, kind of like what you mentioned. It's like, you know, I would not be here in this. I did not take this lightly. I'm not treating this lightly. Um, what I am presenting to you is facts. This is not just, and I mean, it should be enough that your daughter is sick. It should, I mean, it should be enough that your kid is, you know, having a mental health crisis and isn't eating, and there's something else going on. You should care more about your child's mental health than your being right. But put that aside, I'm presenting you this information. And again, they're not monsters. They're just, I know it probably sounds like I'm defending them, but really they are good people. They have just been stuck in something for so long.
Yeah.
And I've seen the good. But in my case, to that same point, the good does not outweigh the bad. I'm not staying in the organization. And I'm not saying they're so bad. I'm saying, like, I'm not staying just because of the good. There's way too much bad that's outweighing the good.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, oh, I have all the answers and come follow me. I'm just saying, I got to get out of this for my sanity, for my mental, physical health, my balance, my chakras, or whatever you want to call it, you know, so I can feel, you know, not in a, so I can feel better again.
Yeah.
And move on with life and sort of stabilize. And if you can't understand that, you're going to treat me like I'm dead or I'm this horrible person, well, then that's on you. I don't know what else to. I love you. The door is always open, but I'm not going to keep groveling for your love and approval and beg for you to acknowledge my existence. So, anyways, but that's that. Yeah, the stranglehold that the Jehovah's Witnesses organization has on people and their families is really intense.
Yeah, and
And
it's
so that's, yeah.
and it's not just a misinterpretation that JWs have. You know, Christians would have been glad to say JWs misinterpret everything, but you know, it's in the text. Jesus clearly says, if you don't love me more than father, mother, spouse, children, land, if you don't love me more than anyone else, you're not worthy to be my disciple. I mean, it's very clear. He says, I've come to bring a sword between parents. Like that's it's right in the text. It's not a misinterpretation. If you love Jesus, you love a cult leader. I mean, that's just it's where it's at.
And I mean, like, and even so, you know, and I hear what you're saying, you know, because the definition of a cult is like following a charismatic leader. In this case, it's a bunch of leaders in the Jehovah's Witnesses. You know what, Tim? It doesn't. I'm not drawn to Christianity. I don't. It's not. I don't. I'm not interested. But I have enough. I treat people with dignity and respect, as I'm sure you do too. And just, you know, it's like, fine, you can believe what you want to believe, but when you start encroaching on when you start violating basic human rights, like, is that something that Jesus would do? Like, in the case of like the Jehovah's Witnesses, like, really? You know, love God, love your neighbor, and like, where does shunning fit into that? And I mean, we could get into like where they get the shunning rule and policy and how they distort it and how they use it to their own ends. But that's I could go down that, false teachers and all that, and don't greet that man and all that sort of thing. But like telling people you can't speak to your own daughter or your own mother, it's inhumane. It's a violation of basic human rights. And so, whatever, if you want to believe in Jesus or you go to church and it makes you a better person and you treat people with dignity and respect, whatever, do your thing. But Jehovah's Witnesses practice, just kind of circling back around, when you practice mandated shunning, this isn't even about Jesus anymore. You guys are just narcissistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Narcissistic abusers. That's what that's what it's a control issue.
Well, I do want to go in a second to sort of the post deconstruction stage, but I was just going to tell you a really quick anecdote that you reminded me of that I think was similar to where your story about the guy talking about depression and the going to the Bible verse. I remember church I went to here, a pretty big church in Atlanta. It's called Perimeter Church, and the founder of the church, Randy Pope, he was preaching, and he was giving an illustration of something. He'd been counseling a woman who had gone through the grief of her 1-year-old baby had died, and he had permission to share what he was sharing with her privately. And it was one of those same kind of moments with you, like what the hell? Just what did he just say? Like, oh my God, this is awful. But he was trying to make a point in a sermon, and he used it as an illustration. But and this is part of Calvinism as well, so Calvinism would fit into this. But he was saying to the church, like, church, you need to understand a principle. And I told this to this woman, and I said, ma'am, you need to understand that you're emotionally not going to heal from this loss until you get your theology straight. Because what happens is we have these worldly ideas of what I deserve and what the baby deserves, and what how life should go. And when God lets us down from those expectations, we're so like depressed. But if you had the right theology, you wouldn't have been going that route. You would have Your theology would have taken care of all this and kept you on the straight and narrow. And so he's explained this. He's like, and I'm going to tell you what the theology is that you needed to have. He said, ma'am, your baby deserved to die. You need to understand that your baby deserves to die. The fact that any of us have one more breath is a grace from God. He could strike us dead any moment. The fact he's letting your pulse still go is his kindness. But we all deserve to die, including your baby. And I remember thinking to myself at that moment, technically, he's correct. Theologically, he's correct. And oh my God, what a horrible thing to say to a woman who's going through this grief. But that was like one of several moments where it was just like you get shocked where you're realizing, like going back to that quote I said, you're realizing that you have become a monster. Where I didn't say those words, but I did mentally agree with him. And so and that's the kind of stuff that just shakes you up. And I guess maybe as a segue to to your back to your story, this deconstruction process does end up becoming one of those things where you're just shaken up over and over and over. But when you finally make the transition, you realize that one of the big things that's happening is you now are a brand new person. We would have used the word born again as Christians. You're now sort of born again, but you're realizing, like, I've got a whole new life, whole new worldview. Everything has changed. I mean, the whole galaxy's changed, the way I perceive science and my place and time and space. Everything is different. But for sure, the way I view myself and my life, my short life here, it's different. As you're beginning to do that, what were some of the things that, number one, you were comparing and contrasting in terms of like issues, maybe, for example, of peace, like the peace you had as a JW versus the peace you were having now that you were moving on, just ignoring for the moment the shunning, but just internally the piece of like, okay, I was like steeped in falsehood. What were some of the things that you were starting to see transition in terms of your mental health and your peace, and maybe sort of related, like what are some of the big things of religious trauma that you've begun to over the year, last whatever 5-6 years here, um what are some of the things that you would say have been some of the biggest game changers for you, where you've said, I was out, but there was still some roots to pull up, you know?
To be perfectly honest with you, Tim, my a lot of people, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses who wake up, their whole worldview is shattered. And my worldview was not shattered. It wasn't like, oh my God, my whole world is turned upside down. Because I mentioned when I found the bite model and realized that Jehovah's Witnesses were in fact a cult, and it was just a group that was just trying, like any other cult or any other group that's trying to control people and use fear mongering and all those tactics. When I realized that they were just any other group and that we weren't special in that way, it was a huge relief. Actually, it just confirmed my suspicions. Not a relief that they're horrible and doing horrible things and harming people, but there was a relief of, oh, we're not special. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't the chosen people. This is just, it was more of an objective learning of, oh, this is what happened to me. It was an understanding of what happened to me. And that brought me a sense of inner peace, of understanding what I came from. Trying to think of how else to put it. And I had to go to therapy. I realized therapy is a thing that some people, they are for it, and some people like, I don't need therapy, don't talk about therapy. Some people like, I don't have the money or whatever. I went through, like, just briefly to give you an idea, I went through like during my waking up process and finally leaving, through like 5 therapists, just sort of going through each to see who I would click with. Not to see who would tell me everything I want to hear, but who would really give me constructive feedback and that I felt like I could really speak to. And my point bringing that up is, out of 5 therapists, Tim, not one had a grasp of the witnesses or knew the gravity of the witnesses. And so my point in telling you this is it was almost re-traumatizing. And I know trauma is such an overused term nowadays, but it was almost sort of re-traumatizing to be like, well, yeah, this happened, or this didn't happen, or I didn't hit these certain developmental milestones, or I don't understand, blah, blah. And they're just sitting back with their clipboard and going just kind of like, really? Huh? And it's kind of, it's embarrassing and confusing, and you feel like, look, I already feel like this otherness, I feel this weirdness, and this, I've been isolated from normal society, this whole time. I'm coming to you for healing and this deconstruction process, and kind of piece me like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. I'm trying to piece myself back together. And when you kind of just sit back with your clipboard and just don't know what to do with that information, I'm not the only one who's been through that, Tim. Other former Jehovah's Witnesses said they basically had to apply salve to their own wounds and like explain to therapists, like, yeah, it's extreme and ... And they kind of had to walk their therapist through that. So anyways, but learning that it was a cult, and then finally finding a therapist who had some understanding and could help me understand what I'm trying to say, emotional manipulation. For me, it wasn't a doctrinal thing. A lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses struggle with, oh, well, is there still gonna, am I wrong? Are they right about Armageddon? They still maybe have residual fear or whatever, or they really struggle with, there is no Jehovah. It was all a lie. They leave very angry and upset. For me, it wasn't a doctrinal thing. It always sort of felt like magical thinking or far-fetched, even from the time that I was a small child. For me, it was undoing layer upon layer of emotional manipulation and learning to set boundaries. That's where I gained inner peace as time went on, because that was very uncomfortable. Learning to be assertive, say how I feel, say no. No is a complete sentence. Recognizing what gaslighting is, narcissism, and how that played out on a religious level, and how that's modeled for families, and how mothers and fathers end up showing those traits. And so really looking at it from a standpoint of emotional manipulation, there's Dr. Susan Forward. She wrote an excellent book called Emotional Blackmail. And I know that's not a novel idea for a lot of people listening, but she talks about the fog. She calls it the fog: fear, obligation, and guilt. And she's talking about intimate partner relationships, but in this case, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, they run on fear, obligation, and guilt. So being able to reclaim my voice, disassociate from the organization, revoke my membership, and start drawing boundaries of what's acceptable, and I'm not going to allow you to speak to me this way, I'm not going to tolerate this behavior, that was incredibly empowering. And then understanding from the BITE model and understanding from therapy what had happened to me, it made me feel like a survivor and a thriver, for lack of a better word that might sound cheesy, instead of just a victim of look at what happened to me. Yeah, it happened to me, but now I understand it, and am I going to allow it to continue to happen? So knowing that I had my power back, I know this all sounds like self-help drivel, but really, when you gain that power back of, I'm not going to allow a man to come, an elder in a suit, come bang down my door. You do that, I sue you. I'm not going to allow you to speak to me like this or raise your voice when I speak to you on the phone. Reclaiming just your self-respect and not putting up with shit. That's basically.
It's amazing. I love what you're doing. I would say, if you can pardon the expression, preach it. That's good stuff. It's good stuff. Can I ask?
That was for me. I mean, everybody's deconstruction process is different. So, anyways.
No, those are critical. And I think I'm sort of from a similar background where a lot of the self-help stuff came off as woo-woo and secular garbage. And so when someone says even something like, you need to learn to love yourself, there's a part of me that just feels like it's therapy and I kind of cringe, but it really is a part of the process is learning to love yourself and perhaps, a better way to say it is to be kind to yourself. But, when you're taught all the years you're a worthless, wicked sinner, it takes some time to undo that. It really does.
You're broken, you need to be saved, you need to, self-flagellation. Yeah, it's like, no, I'm not perfect, but I'm doing all right. And, I have self-worth and I don't need somebody chirping in my ear that I need them or I'm going to die or I'm not good enough. You keep that shit to yourself.
Exactly. I do have few final questions real quick, and I want to ask you in a moment just to sort of plug your channel and tell us a little bit more about that. But sort of a final question, maybe a lot of people when they go through this, they take a route where they're going through what you might call just adjusting their worldview. So for a lot of Christians, they would go from fundamentalist Christianity to progressive Christianity. They would say God doesn't hate you and he's not going to send you to hell. Hell's not real. That's man-made. But there is a God and he really loves you and he really cares about you. And if you'll take the loving parts, then we can redeem Christianity. It's not a bad message. Other people are like, this is like myself, this is mythology. And there might be a few good ideas, but I can take the good ideas from philosophy just as quick. This is mythology. I don't believe any of it. But in that process, no matter how you're landing on that, whether you're landing more agnostic or atheist or progressive Christian, you're sort of reframing spirituality in different ways. You're kind of saying, my spirituality is I feel connected to the universe and the stars and time and space. For someone else, I remember I had an aunt that told me, I'm not a Christian, but I feel very spiritual, and I feel most spiritual when I'm walking my dogs up on the mountain. That's my church. For other people, they feel like there's still some sense of like, I think we do go somewhere, and I feel connected to the universe, and I do feel like my consciousness is going to go somewhere. What does spirituality look like for you over the last 5 to 7, 10 years as you've changed? Do you feel like you've had to replace anything? Not in a sense like you had to, but just that it happened. Do you feel like there's any sense that you have of a bigger picture of an afterlife or a purpose in life? And just how do you frame all that part of it, or do you feel like you're more of a materialist at this point?
Well, to kind of answer your question, I mean, I have a jumble of thoughts, really. I'll just say it, I have a difficult time believing in a warm, fuzzy Christian God because why would he bless me, some chick in North America, when there's, some faithful woman or young girl in the Congo who's being violated and murdered? Let's just be real. Or there's people in third world countries who are starving or living in abject poverty. Why I'll be honest with you, I have a really difficult time believing in a warm, fuzzy, loving Christian God that you know allows so much suffering, allows so much human suffering. So that's where I'm at on that. I definitely don't hold that belief. I really struggle with that. I don't think that that's real, because if he is warm and loving and fuzzy and all that, he would be solving the horrors that humanity is facing.
And arguably, he wouldn't have created a lot of them in the first place. I think a lot of the problems we have are he created them in the first place.
Yeah, so I struggle with that. I'm more on the agnostic side. Honestly, I don't really have a huge profound answer for you. I feel I love the beach. I love nature, kind of like, whoever's, walking their dog in the mountains, that kind of thing. I do believe that I'm not opposed to spirituality, and or even anybody I'm not against people who have their faith if it makes them a good person and they don't treat other people like shit and ruin people's lives. We're cool. But just as far as spirituality goes, I believe there's something else out there, but I don't presume to know what that is. I just don't have the belief that of Christianity, that if you just believe enough or pray enough, God will bless you. Some people look at me and they say, "Well, oh, God blessed you," or "God bless you," or um, "Man, everything you've been through, God has been watching you." And I appreciate where they're coming from, because I know that they're coming from a good place and they're believers, And it's very sweet for them to say that. And at the same time, internally, I'm kind of going, well, why didn't he save the girl who died of leukemia? Why didn't he save, I could go on and on. So I mean, as far as spirituality, I believe in spirituality, but that's I don't even know really how to answer your question. That's it's such a vague thing. It could have different definitions for different people, but I definitely don't have that sort of, I don't believe in a warm, fuzzy, loving Christian God. I just don't.
Mm.
But I appreciate people who, I guess I could say I appreciate people who do and actually practice or actually behave in ways, I should say, give them credit, behave in ways that I guess Jesus would have behaved. I have an issue with the hypocrisy and the I don't know, the logical fallacies of how could he love somebody here and rescue them and save them, but these people are suffering. I have an issue with the whole human suffering thing, and that really colors my my worldview as far as religion and spirituality goes. I believe
Mm.
there's probably something else out there, but I'm having a difficult time with that. Yeah. So I like to see the good in people and appreciate people who try to do good and make the world a better place.
Mm.
And but I do believe that's just a private thing. I don't care as long as you treat people well, treat people with dignity and respect. We're not gonna have a problem.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to take what I said back about last question. I had one question I meant to ask you earlier. When you began to learn about other Christian denominations and so forth, did you ever play the theoretical game of, gosh, if I had grown up in a Baptist church or a Presbyterian church and my salvation had been, you know, once you believe you're safe, you don't have to earn it anymore. Um, if I had no real bad experiences in church, if they'd been respectful and had boundaries in my church, and did you ever wonder if you could have gotten trapped by it if life had turned out differently?
I very well could have. And really, what reason would I have to leave it if I felt like if I had everything? I got my family, maybe I find a spouse, life is good, kids or whatever, and it provides everything I need, and there's it's good social fabric and a good basis for a family or what. Yeah, I could have very well, I don't know, hindsight's 2020. Or you could always play that game with anything. Well, what if I was born in this part of the world, or this, I'd gone through this, maybe this would change me. I don't know. But it is funny that you bring that up, because Jehovah's Witnesses, just as a final thing, Jehovah's Witnesses are not allowed to explore other churches. I don't know if you know that, or if a lot of people know that.
No.
You're not allowed to go. Like, your friend Susie invites you to her church on Sunday. Yeah, I'll go to the Kingdom Hall, Bethany. Sure. Will you come to my church on Sunday, the next Sunday? Oh, I can't do that. They don't believe in interfaith or anything like that. So my point being, when I left, Tim, this is funny. People are like, "Oh, did you go crazy?" Like a little bit of, and I was just like, "Oh no, I actually went to church." I went to church, and again, I'm not a church goer, so I'm not attached or affiliated to any sort of church at the moment, or care to be. But I felt like it was my right. I was not allowed. How can you raise your child in an echo chamber? How do I know this is the truth, as a Jehovah's Witness? So actually, it's funny that you bring that up, because I did go to a Baptist church. I went to a synagogue. I went to a Universalist Unitarian church, Episcopal. Like, I went to a variety of churches just because I wasn't allowed to growing up. So that's kind of just a funny side note. I was a kid in a candy store, and it was just so different from the Witnesses. But I'm sure if I grew up in that, I would be rolling my eyes, or
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this is so lame, or I don't want to do this on Wednesday night. I don't want to listen to the church band. I'd rather be at, whatever. I'd rather be at the Tool concert or whatever.
Yeah.
just tossing out. I'd rather go to see Pearl Jam instead of the church band. So it's all, we could all play that game, but yeah, I definitely, when I left the Witnesses though, it was like, I am reclaiming my right to go to church.
That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes it's nice to just have that freedom to explore
Yeah.
different ideas. It's
Yeah, exactly. Freedom to explore different ideas, and that's definitely something that
mm,
wanted. I think everybody should have at least the chance to do,
yeah.
and not have that information withheld from you, and that flow of information, which happened in the Witnesses. So you weren't allowed to explore anything. At least give people a chance to explore and reach, use their critical thinking skills and reach their own conclusions.
Yeah. Going to the theoretical for a second, I remember it took my breath away thinking about like, what if all the stars had aligned with my Christian life and I'd never had any issues? And because you do meet some people where it's everything is like Stepford Wives kind of Christianity, like everything is just fine. Everything is light and airy and fairy, and there's the church can do no wrong. The Bible has no mistakes in it, and if you just lean back and trust God, it's all good. And they have very very rose-colored glasses on about their life and their Christianity. And mine was always rough in different ways. I had very strong faith, but I remember thinking when I deconverted, my first thought was like, "Holy shit, this is mythology. This isn't real." But then my next thought was like, "Holy shit, I could have been stuck in this till the day I died. I could have easily imagined it." And it took my breath away. And I felt like I won the lottery. Like at least I have some time left probably to reclaim my life, and it was a big deal to me. But anyway, I do want to give you some time here as we wrap up. Could you tell us about what you do with your channel for anyone that hasn't seen it yet, and sort of what your hopes are for anyone that sort of follows along, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So no, I have a YouTube channel, Stop the Shunning. What everything we've talked about today, Tim, just raising awareness of the Jehovah's Witnesses harmful mandated shunning policy. They will try to tell you that it's not a real thing, it's a hoax or whatever. Oh yeah, family relations still continue. Family relationships are strained, they're broken, families are torn apart. I haven't spoken to my parents or heard their voice in 8 years. I've had a friend commit suicide over the shunning policy, and he's not the only one. So yeah, it's very harmful, and I just want people to know and be able to make an informed decision, whether they're current Jehovah's Witnesses who are questioning watching the channel because they're not supposed to watch me, or other YouTubers, they're not supposed to, but if they're brave enough and they're actually showing courage and getting online and asking those questions. It's scary. I used to be in their position. I just hope that they get the information that they need to make an informed decision about whether to stay. If you want to stay, then you have the right to do that, but I hope it's for your own reasons and not because you're being threatened. So, talking about the shunning policy and things like that. And I just want people to feel validated. You're not going crazy. Don't let the organization gaslight you and control you and make you feel bad about yourself. So, I was once in your shoes a lot. We're all, we've all been through it. And even though our circumstances may vary a little bit, we all kind of went through this standard template of what it was like to be a Jehovah's Witness. So, I try to use humor and get people to laugh a little bit and just feel less alone. So yeah. So
That's awesome.
that's Stop the Shunning. I've often said with the whole shunning thing is that I've joked and said, like, if you want to give me the finger and cut me out of your life because your own conscience dictates that you don't like me, I offend your value system, there's something about me you don't like, and for your own reasons you're cutting me out of your life, that's fine, I can respect that. But I take issue with the organization's mandated shunning policy. It's a directive. And so I know that people are handing their conscience over to the governing body. So that's what I take issue with. And I just want people to have the right information to be able to make an informed decision to make sure that they're living according to their conscience and not living out of fear and fear of reprisal from the leadership and from the congregation and from their families.
I love it. It's so important for us to take our stories and, like they say, some of our stories become someone else's survival manual. And helping people escape is a big deal. We're talking about people's lives literally being reclaimed and people waking up and escaping the matrix. And it's a beautiful thing to be part of it. It's such a privilege and an honor to be able to walk through this with people, because you remember the dark days when you were like, life is so sad and so crushing. And you as time goes on, you get back on your feet and you create your own community again, and you figure out how to be strong even through the loneliness by yourself. You just get past it and you move on, and life's okay again. But you remember there are people going through this where they just can't imagine life ever being okay again, and it's such a big deal to give them hope. So thank you for what you're doing. I really really appreciate it. Well, I know I asked you a lot of questions. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrapped up?
I think probably, if anything, just try not to if you, I mean, I think of Jehovah's Witnesses. This could apply to anybody, but I guess I'll speak specifically to ex Jehovah's Witnesses. If you leave, just try not to become an ideologue that gets trapped in a new echo chamber. I see a lot of ex-JWs, and I know this could apply to other groups, but I see a lot of ex-JWs sort of hop from one camp to another, and they're still caught in the cobwebs of their prior indoctrination. So there's this temptation to jump from one thing where, oh, I deconstructed and this is wrong, and then to hop into something else, whether it's political or religious, where they're starting to divide the world into strictly black and white terms again, us versus them. And I would just say beware of that and not become the thing you hate, because I believe we have more in common than our differences. I would just hope that people, if anything, just hope people can look at our shared humanity and try to see the good in people instead of being quick to condemn and quick to judge.
Good thoughts. I totally appreciate you saying that, because I think that's a big struggle for a lot of us. Is we were fundamentalists before, and we're leaving the faith, but we're still fundamentalists in our new lack of faith. And yeah, it's to not see the nuance after all we've been through is pretty amazing. But again, it's to me, it's a good testament to the fact that the brainwashing didn't just occur on the level of the doctrine and the theology, but it was very psychological, which you've touched on a few times today. And it's very much, this is emotional. It's very much tribalism, us versus them. And the fact that we get these structures of how we interpret everything, just because you're discarding, the Bible or the cross or whatever, that doesn't mean that the structure for how you interpret stuff isn't still there. And I feel like in many ways, the deconversion process is ongoing, because you're looking for the roots. Remember, when I was a Christian, they would say, when you're coming to the cross for the first time, you're doing one big repentance. You're saying, I was completely wrong, and I give myself to the truth of the Word of God. But that they said, we remind you, repentance is an ongoing thing. You constantly have repentance being, you have to change your mind over and over for the rest of your life about all your selfishness and pride. And in a parallel sense, going sort of flipping it backwards, I feel like in many ways, you sort of like you repent, as it were. You change your mind about the Christian worldview, but in some ways, that process never really ends. You have to keep on thinking to yourself, where are the roots of this, and how many layers of this onion do I have to peel back? But if you don't, honestly, I think you can get suckered into some of the same old habits. And I think it's a truism that we are creatures of habit, and there's a part of us that loves to have the answers. And it's such a cool thing especially when you see like a scientist that's super smart, that emphasizes this. Some of the best, coolest people I've heard say this kind of stuff, like, it's a really big deal to say, I just don't know. I don't know. And I probably don't even understand how much I don't know. There's just so much I don't know about the universe and about how life works. And to have that humility. And it's funny, when we were Christians, everything was like, we're so humble, we're humbling ourselves before the Lord, but we were really arrogant. And to actually have real humility and say, I don't know how the world works, but I do know one thing. I know that there's a lot of beautiful people around me, a lot of hurting people, and there's an awful lot of people who've tricked each other. And at this point, it's a beautiful thing to help guide each other into enough information to make good choices. And also, as you touched on, to have the boundaries and to be able to say, we can do better than this. Like, we don't have to be toxic, and we don't have to pass it on to our own kids. And that's another big motivator for me, is to say, if you dig deep enough to pull the roots out of the badness of this thing, you will literally end up, yes, you'll improve your life, but you will give your kids, the next generation, a much better shot at autonomy and a beautiful life, and far less toxicity. And to me, that's worth its weight in gold. Leave this planet better than we found it,
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Well, I'll just wrap up again by saying we've been speaking with Bethany Leger. Did I say it right? Leger?
Yeah, you got it. It's Cajun French. I wouldn't expect anybody to know how to. You're totally fine. You get a pass.
I love it. Well, we've been speaking with Bethany Leger, and Bethany, again, is a YouTuber. Please go check out the link beneath this video, like and subscribe, and check out her great work. And Bethany, thank you so much. I look forward to chatting with you again someday, but I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. And thanks again, and we'll do it again sometime.
Thank you, Tim. I really enjoyed being on your channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.